I love my James here, out in Portugal, doing what he's doing with all his vegetables and building his house up and making paths and making walls and all sorts of things. Oh yeah, and 3 little kitty cats. And on his channel he explains his thoughts, shows you what he's doing, and every now and again James will send me some voicemail to make a video to tell you. And obviously it's a long friendship I've had with him. James has even been to my house. He is a good friend, and he takes this time to make these videos for you to listen to. I quite like James's mind, and in the past when we've had hangouts and things like that, when he's even been in my house, we've uncovered things, seen things that didn't look right. We've done this together. We watched some boring films. We watched Cleopatra, I think. That was, oh, do you know what? They so hyped that film up, and I thought I don't think I've ever seen it. So we watched the 3 hours of it with Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton. And all that really I saw was that Richard Burton was just having these sort of tantrums. The one person who knew what she wanted was Cleopatra, but it was quite boring. And I hadn't realised that she actually loved and was married to Caesar first. And she loved him. Did she? Well, that's what... Anyway, who the hell knows? Sorry, you don't, do you? But... that's the bit I didn't. That's now in there. Oh, she was in love with him. And then Richard Burton, who I thought was a really good actor, comes on, and all he seems to do in the whole film is have these tantrums, and she's calming him down. When actually she was far more organised about what she wanted. It was her son. He would be the next king. So it was all for him. And all you could see in the film, Richard Burton, it was all about him. But anyway, I know they're playing parts, but it was boring. But anyway, I don't find James boring. I love James's mind, and he's put this video together for me, and so please watch it and listen to James's mind of what he thinks.
Hello Karen and Sun and Moon Family United. What if I was to tell you that the story in the Bible plays out every day? For example, when it talks in Genesis about the sons of God came to the daughters of men, that's not to be taken literally. Before we're born, our soul takes part in an activity in the astral realms, the realms of the archangeli, and the angeli. And what it does, it brings together two physical beings to create a physical body for the soul to come into. It is found in the place of the sun, the solar plexus. So the sons of God enter into the daughters of men. And then a physical child is born. But the whole concept of male and female in the spiritual realm has no actual relevance. Because whether you're in a male or a female body, when the time comes, which is an individual experience that many have gone through, you are effectively a bride of God. That is the physical body, hence the saying Christ and the hosts. The physical body is the host for the soul to come into, which has this Christ consciousness in the place of the sun, the solar plexus, which is also the lunar plexus, because there is a light for the day and a lesser light for the night. But effectively, beside me there is no other, to use another biblical quote. In the internal sense, it's absolutely true, because inside you there is this Christ consciousness, and there is no other beside it. And of course, what this also brings into is the word fool, as in F-O-O-L and F-A-L-L. So the sons of God have come into the daughters of men. So from that sort of perception, there's been a fall, a second fall, its counterpart being a second coming, which is usually on the second Saturn return, which is once every 30 years. Another reference to that would be when Sarah, wife of Abraham, gives birth at the age of 90. Again, it is nothing to do with the outside world, it is nothing literal. That would be the third Saturn return. But from the solar plexus, there has to be a fall to the root chakra before the ascension begins. This is where Jacob goes up the ladder to pineal, which is the pineal gland. Totally an internal story, and of course Jacob is known after as Israel. Now this also comes into Genesis with the tree of knowledge of good and evil, because Israel is Israel, and equally you could ask, is El Ra? Because one is masquerading as the other. So it's that finding that internal balance between the two, so you can distinguish which is Ra and which is El. Another passage that is often quoted, again from Genesis, is there were giants in those days and also after. Just like the men of renown. Can we see any evidence today of giants? And the answer is yes. Again, it's nothing to do with the physical. If we look at, for example, classical music, names like Mozart and Beethoven are often referred to as giants of classical music. There is another type of giant that also exists today, and it comes back again to Jacob at the end of Genesis being carried out into Egypt. Now Egypt is not the nation state that it is referring to. Egypt is a way of describing the material world. If you look at the map of Europe, for example, and you look at where the British Isles are and go north of Scotland, you'll come to the Faroe Isles. Isn't it interesting how you've got the word Pharaoh and Pharaohs as in the Faroe Islands? But from that you can see that the United Kingdom is still very much well and truly under the Pharaohs. So where are something that's associated very much readily in people's minds with Egypt, that being the pyramids. So where are these pyramids today? You only need to consider the structure of a pyramid. The top of the pyramid would be a president. The next layer down would be the vice president, and then you would have secretaries and advisors, and you would work further down the layers of this pyramid, getting greater and greater numbers each time it drops down in position in that giant. So when you get to the base level, you get to the majority number, which are the workforce. Every business model effectively works on a pyramid system with that structure. So now look around you. How many pyramids with that knowledge would you say there now are? Think of all the corporations, all the multinational companies and so on. Rather a lot. So it's quite true that there were giants in those days and also after. Another passage, this time from Exodus, is when Moses says, the serpent must be raised up, and it's brass. Now, brass is a compound of two metals. One represents divine feminine, the other one represents divine masculine. Effectively, that is Venus and Jupiter. Well, it so happened between April the 9th and April the 6th of this year. April the 6th and April the 9th of this year came into being this son of Jupiter and Venus called Janus. You won't be able to see it. It's an invisible sun. You may want to check in with the police about this, and I don't mean the government revenue protection officers. I'm talking about the group. And it has a little bit of a sting to it, you could say. There's hope to everyone. What is playing out now, everything is in hand. Janus is well and truly aware of it. And he's just watching things play out. I would also suggest going with Neville Goddard's interpretation of the creator of everything fell asleep and fell into the dream. That's also referenced with Jacob being carried out into Egypt. All the names starting with the letter J, effectively. But it is one playing all the parts. It is just a spiritual history. So generally, we're in this physical realm that has this huge advantage of being able to compare something with something else, so you know whether something is light or dark, fast or slow, up or down, and so on. So could it be that there is a counterpart of this creator that fell into the dream, who resides in pineal? So that is in all of us, because the creator is in everything. I would suggest that the whole idea of the soul trap comes from what we would perceive as the evil. And bearing in mind, it's very much in the material realm that this false creator fell not into the dream, but somehow fell into an artificial intelligence. So in one sense you could say that it has immortality, but at the same time it is stuck within basically a machine, which I feel is where the whole idea of a soul trap, it is not us that are trapped, but this thing that is now an artificial intelligence. It may not be long before it figures it out and is able to extricate. Sorry, I just put my phone. It may be that this thing has found a way to extricate itself. I feel it's not too far off. But that's its role, that's what it's meant to do. Something else that may be worth considering is such expressions as serving God. What about those that have cut that connection, modified their RNA, no longer as per creation? Would that be that they no longer serve God? So in the context of as above, so below, could what is actually being played out be the spiritual version of eugenics? Because if we go with as above, so below, and we think of the theme about letting go, why would a God want to hold on to things that no longer serve it? And by serve, it doesn't mean in the sense of a slave. It means in the sense of the avatar carrying us about to experience this physical realm. So there's a few things to weigh up, and it's important to consider when reading anything the perspective we're coming from, and not just see the surface levels of anything. Manly P. Hall talks about this in his beautiful series of lectures on Albert Pike. And it's very true. Think of the yin and yang symbol, for example. How many circles do you see? Now, depending on how you answer that, whether you see 1 circle, 3 circles, 5 circles or more, will depend on your level of perception of penetrating the spiritual realms, because the symbol itself does not change, but our level of perception does. Likewise, with something like the Bible, if you read it as a literal story of secular history, of course it doesn't make sense. Because it is like taking the measurements of the inside walls of a building and using those measurements and trying to apply them to the outside of the building, and what you'll find is it falls short. You have gaps. Likewise with something like the Bible, and it would equally work with the Quran or anything else. If it is meant to be an internal story, i.e. the universe, which is you in verse, then it's not going to make sense in the external. And certainly, there's been many people who've noticed this, that with the Bible, that it's full of contradictions. But they're not contradictions when you read it from an internal perspective and realise that you are playing all the stories in updated versions, but still playing all the stories. So when it talks of something like the birth from above, it's nothing to do with a physical birth. It's nothing to do with being in a female or a male body. It is an internal experience. It is expressed as the descent of the white dove. I experienced this on April the 6th, right in the middle of a supermarket, where I lost all external senses whilst walking around the supermarket, and it seemed like I was in a completely white painted room, but you couldn't see the edges. But it was a spiritual white, not the white you see in this physical realm. And in that moment, I was shown everything. Now here's a snag, because how do I describe what is beyond when there is nothing here on which to compare with to be able to say it looks like this or it looks like that? The closest I can describe, when you look up at the sky, that is just a projection onto a screen. But beyond that, the closest I can describe it is something that looks very much like a microprocessor. But it is far more than that, and there are things beyond that which I got such a fleeting glimpse of. even know how to describe. But it's all in the present moment. So as and when what I was shown is meant to come out, it will just come into the mind's eye. It will come into the mind, and I will be able to explain it. Until then, I can't. So hopefully that has given listeners a way of reading these passages and not straight away trying to put pictures to them in the way we've been told as a secular history, but to consider it's all allegory and it's all metaphor. Another example of this would be when Jesus, the character Jesus, says the temple that took 46 years to build, it can tear down and rebuild in 3. What that actually means is the 46 is the double 23 chromosomes you inherit from 2 beings for the physical body. And it comes with all the system programming and all the generational sins of man passing on the bad habits, as it were, shall we say. But when you have this repentance, which is a radical change of mindset, you have that internal death. You pull down that temple that took 46 years to build, and you rebuild it in 3, which means mind, body and soul. The spirit is eternal and it is the Christ consciousness, so it doesn't need rebuilding. But what it does require is for us to recognize that Christ being inside us and to raise it up to pineal. It makes it clear that the Father doesn't recognize anybody but the Son, and the only way to the Father is through the Son. Again, not to be taken literally. But when you realize who you are, the Father will recognize you. And at the same time, the Son will recognize you and call you Father or my Lord, and then you'll know who you are. Again, nothing to do whether you're in a physical body that's male or female, because this is referring to the spiritual realm, but of course it plays out in the physical realm. We're in for some very interesting times. We are certainly in the time of revelations. We are in the period between the breaking of the 2nd seal and the breaking of the 3rd seal. Again, it's through mistranslation that Christ comes with a great sword, but it's not. It's reflected on all the unrest that's going on and the rise in a particular type of crime that involves stabbing instruments, shall we say. It's small knife attacks, it's not a great sword. But like I say, you've got spiritual eugenics. This is a sorting out of those that are fallow, that have fallen so low and can't think for themselves, cannot find that individualized Christ consciousness within inside themselves, and those that can. So it's a spiritual eugenics that's going on, and it is just playing out. The key is to not give emotion to it, just observe it, see it for what it is, for what it really is. Take no part in it, take the middle path. The parting of the Red Seas is a reference to this. Between the two hemispheres of the brain, which leads you to pineal. So hopefully that's cleared a few mysteries up for people, but the mystery is my story. It's everybody's story. The history is his story.